I now call on the Attorney-General and Minister for Economy, Civil Service and Communications, the Honourable Aiyaz Sayed-Khaiyum. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, the question by the Honourable Member actually refers to this document here, part 2 of this document. And of course, there is an addendum to the document that has specific mentions of some of the matters that I assume that the Honourable Member is referring to. As the Honourable Member does know that when we do have any amendments to any of the laws, it will be brought to Parliament, because any amendments or repeal of any particular laws will need to be brought to Parliament for parliamentary approval. Mr. Speaker, sir, the manner in which the question is put is being portrayed in a very simple manner, but there's quite a few issues that have been addressed by the ILO and the committee in the Committee of Experts' observations. Mr. Speaker, sir, just for those members who may not necessarily understand how the ILO Committee of Experts work, is that they are complaints or grievances that any trade union organization actually can take to this committee. And the veracity of those complaints, of course, needs to be ascertained. It needs to be verified. There's inquiries into it. We've at times, of course, found that sometimes complaints are unnecessary or they are over-exaggerated. So if I can, for example, Mr. Speaker, so just give an example. There's one complaint regarding the trade union rights and civil liberties. And then the FTUC claimed of intimidation by police, arrest, detention, interrogation, and filing criminal charges against trade unionists, as well as prolonged confiscation of personal and union property and violent dispersal of gatherings between April and June 2019. As we know that we have not seen any violent dispersal of crowds of trade unionists. There has been, of course, Felix Anthony has been charged under a particular offense, and that is, of course, before the courts. But if you look at what the committee is saying, it says, I'll go into specifically this one particular line. It says, the committee requests the government to consider issuing instructions to the police and armed forces in this regard, and to provide training to ensure that any actions taken during demonstrations respect the basic civil liberties and fundamental labor rights of workers and employers. Furthermore, the committee firmly expects that any charges against Mr. Anthony related to the exercise of his trade union activities will be immediately dropped. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, you can see that the committee is not asking the Fijian government to amend the law or to repeal the law. It's essentially asking the Fijian government to consider issuing instructions to the police and the armed forces to provide training to ensure that any actions during demonstrations respect basic civil liberties. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, furthermore, it's saying about any charges against Mr. Anthony related to exercise of trade union activities. He's not been actually charged for trade union activities per se, but various actions by him. And obviously it's amiss of me to go into the details because the matter is before the courts. Now, for example, another complaint here, and the committee says, and I quote, the committee trusts that the government will refrain from any undue interference in the nomination and appointment of members to the ERAB. Mr. Speaker, sir, ERAB is the Employment Relations Advisory Board, which consists of representations from the private sector, from the trade unions, and also governments. Mr. Speaker, sir, FTUC, in fact, on its own volition, has been boycotting main ERAB from 2019. However, they have been participating in the subcommittee meetings on legislative review. The last meeting of the subcommittee was in February 2021 when they all attended. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, they went off and said, they're not allowing us to go to the meetings, but actually it's not true, because they themselves aren't attending, but they are actually attending the subcommittee meetings. So again, Mr. Speaker, so if you read the details of the recommendations, furthermore, they had, for example, complained that trade unionists were affected by the Political Parties Act that prohibits a officer or a office bearer in a trade union organization to also be a candidate at the same time. Of course, they have complied with it. Felix Anthony, as we know, ran the People's Democratic Party, which Honorable Tambuya was very much a part of. She's obviously switched sides since then. But the PDP, when he contested the election under the PDP banner, he actually resigned as the General Secretary of FTUC. When he did not win a seat in Parliament, he then went back to being the General Secretary of FTUC. Honorable Lavere did the same thing. When he contested in 2014, he did not make it. He had resigned. He did not win. But then subsequently, when there was some space that was created in Sodelpa, he came back into Parliament. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, I mean, these things are happening. It does not in any way infringe upon their right to practice as a trade union official, but there are obviously certain rules in respect of one's ability to participate in Parliament. And one of the reasons behind that, Mr. Speaker, sir, is that as we have seen in the past, that certain officials, when they are also concurrently holding the position as an official of a trade union and also being candidates, they have undue influence because of the position that they hold. They have also undue influence in respect of resources, access to resources. We have seen in the past, this is one of the reasons why, Mr. Speaker, sir, we have said, the law says that when you are a trade union organization, your elections must be conducted by the independent officers of the Fijian Elections Office. Prior to this, Mr. Speaker, sir, it's a well-known fact, general secretaries of very large trade union organizations in Fiji, Mr. Speaker, sir, even though they were the incumbents and their term had come to an end and they were recontesting and the ballot boxes had to be taken throughout Fiji because, public, there were civil servants, etc., whoever they were, who had to vote, the ballot boxes were actually kept in the incumbent's room. And the incumbent actually had the key to the ballot boxes. So the ability to say that you have transparent, independent, fair, free elections on trade union organizations obviously, was limited. You cannot actually claim that. But that was the practice. Now there is no longer the practice. So this is why certain of these laws have been put in place, and I hope that answers the question by the honourable member.
Thank you.